All right, I'm on the record. I'm going to call the meeting to order for the Marijuana Committee for the municipality or the assembly. I want to begin by doing each one introducing around the table. So we got the people that are participating, beginning on my right.
Hi, I'm Cynthia Franklin with the ABC and Marijuana Control Boards.
Amanda Moser, Clerk's Office. Erica McConnell, Planning Department. Seneca Pino, City Prosecutor.
Sean Case, Anchorage Police.
Bruce Schulte, I'm unofficial member of this committee and member of the state's Marijuana Control Board.
Ernie Hall, Anchorage Assembly.
A.B. Domboski, Anchorage Assembly, but I would like to say, Mr. Schulte, you are an official member. You just can't vote.
That's right.
Okay.
You just can't vote.
Ex officio member there.
Yes.
Dick Train, Chairman of the Assembly.
Pete Peterson, Assembly.
Julia Tucker, Assembly Council.
Thank you. Our focus today, once we get through our presentations and reports, is dual licensing and zoning, and Amanda and Erica will get to carry the main part of that topic. I will share with you that last night we did have 4 what I call housekeeping ordinances on the agenda, all 4 of which were approved yesterday evening. And with that, that's going to take care of mine because I want to spend time on important stuff. I'm going to begin with the State of Alaska Alcohol Beverage Control Board. We're extremely lucky to have Cindy Franklin with us, who is the Executive Director. And I'm going to give both of you a chance. We also have Bruce Schulte, who is not only ex officio on our board, but chairs the Marijuana Control Board. So whatever sequence you two want to go in, it's your turn, your time.
Okay, well, I'll start, and thank you for having me at the meeting today. I'm glad that I ran into Mr. Hall in the parking lot earlier today, because I don't think I'm on your email list in terms of knowing all of your meetings. It looks like the last Thursday of every month is the regular meeting, so I'll get that on my calendar. Speaking of calendars, that's the main news I want to share with you today. I want to let everyone know that we have a new timeline. It was sent out to the members of the people who had signed up on the public interest form on our website, and we have endeavored to create enough board meetings for Marijuana Control Board to review each article of proposed regulations after public comment has been received and closed on those articles between now and September 24th. So we're going to have a series of Marijuana Control Board meetings. We're going to meet next Monday and Tuesday, August 31st and September 1st, for the board to finish their review of what we called Set 2, which were Articles 1, 3, and 7. Licensing and fees, Article 1, which the board completed a preliminary review of on August 11th. And then Article 3, retail marijuana stores. Article 7, general operating requirements for all marijuana establishments. Those articles have been out for a round of 30-day public comment, which we received and collated for the board. And the board is making its way through each of those articles and considering the public comment on each section. And we wanted them to have a full day to review each of the articles because it took them a full day to review Article 1. And the Department of Law was very pleased with the record that the board made and the careful review that the board gave both to the draft regulations and to the public comment received relating to those sections. We want the Department of Law to be happy with our process because they are the entity that grades our paper at the end of the regulations making process. So we redid the timeline to make sure that the board really has a day to review each article with public comment. In the meantime, the board reviewed what we call Set 3, which is the remaining 5 articles, Article 4, 5, 6, 8, and 9. And the public comment is currently open for all 5 of those articles and closes at 4:30 p.m. on September 10th. So beginning on September 14th, the board will begin making its way through each of those 5 articles. We've allowed 4 board meeting days, September 14th, which is coincides with the ABC meeting in Kotzebue. So the board will be out in Kotzebue on September 14th. I'm looking probably at Article 4, which is marijuana cultivation facilities. And then September 16th here in Anchorage, September 23rd and 24th. And that fourth day, September 24th, we expect the board to look at Articles 8 and 9, enforcement and general provisions, which is mostly definitions, and which we expect the board to be able to make its way through in one day. So even though those are 2 articles, they're not anywhere near as long as the other articles and don't contain as many rules as the other articles. So we anticipate that by the end of the day on September 24th, the board will have a really good, polished version of all 9 articles. And what will happen is from the 24th to approximately October 2nd, which is a Friday, we, the agency, will be making sure that any changes that the board made to the articles makes its way into the language, that we actually get a good master copy of all 9 articles that reflects all of the board's work accurately, and then get a great public notice out that's been approved by the Department of Law to put all 9 articles back out for an additional round of public comment all at once, so that everyone can see how the articles interact with one another, can see the entire package of regulations, and we expect to leave that out for about 40 days between October 2nd or so and November 11th. And then we'll get that back, and we have the board scheduled for a meeting in November to review that final round of public comment. But in the meantime, while that all 9 articles are back out for one last long round of written public comment, we have reserved 2 days in October for the board to meet and receive oral public comment at the LIO here in Anchorage. We've requested that all LIOs in the entire state be connected, and that hearing be televised on the legislative television channel, so that everyone in the state could theoretically tune in, and anyone could go to their LIO and participate in verbal public comment on the entire set of regulations. So that public comment will be designed to receive any verbal public comment on any of the 9 articles. So that is the rest of the regulations package process. There will be a November 20th meeting also in the LIO here in Anchorage of the board, where the board would review the final round of written public comment, make any further adjustments it deems necessary to the regulatory package, and then theoretically be able to meet the November 24th deadline for adoption of the regulations package. So that's how we intend to get there from here, and I'll leave any further comment for this group to Mr. Schulte.
All right, thanks. Well, as Cindy said, we have a happy Department of Law, and we like a happy Department of Law, so I'm going to be very careful in what I say right now. So I don't get myself in trouble, but that really is the big news, is the schedule. I sort of alluded to this at the Assembly meeting last night. I've got a hard copy here, and I could forward that to anybody who doesn't have it. I will say that, as Cindy pointed out, there was a lot of discussion on virtually every section of the packets, and we had copious public comments. I mean, it was like 135 pages of comments, and staff had very graciously organized those by section. So as we went through the draft section by section, we were able to look at the comments that pertain to that section. It was a very effective way of going through it, and I did know that there were some comments from the municipality of Anchorage, and that sparked some discussion also. So I would just mention that public comment is hugely important, and the better and more concise it is, the more helpful it is, because nothing's been adopted yet. Everything is still in draft form. And I'm really enthusiastic about the schedule, because it does give us the time necessary to go through each section of each article very carefully and consider all the public comment, and hopefully come up with something better than what all the previous states before us have developed. So that's it. We'll be back. Midtown actually on Monday to continue with Article 3.
Yes, there's something going on downtown on Monday. I can't, something distracting, and so we moved that meeting on next Monday and Tuesday to the Frontier Building in Midtown, so that the public can access the board appropriately without having bargaining issues and that kind of thing.
Okay.
Yeah, if anybody is following that, it's in the Frontier Building on C Street. So I don't want folks to show up at the Atwood Building and then think that we pulled a fast one on them.
There you go. Any questions from the committee? A couple of things that I'm curious about. Number one, I can't tell you again how appreciative we are of you, Cynthia, and Sarah. Your response to us have been fantastic. We feel we're genuinely be listened to and responded to. Very, very happy about the performance of the board. You've said it in all of our meetings, so you've heard that we've had concerns about that transition from the alcohol board to the marijuana control board, that it may suddenly become dysfunctional, but it appears that that transaction or transition has happened very smoothly, and you guys are really stepping up. Once you get advanced on this, at one time I thought you mentioned maybe a couple of town hall meetings or some form like that. Do you still intend at some point in time to have an opportunity for the community to be able to come out and engage, or just through the public testimony during committee meetings?
Well, I'll field that, Bruce, if that's
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, go ahead.
And it's a great question, Mr. Hall, and I appreciate it. You know, one of the issues in the Administrative Procedure Act is, taking input outside of the public comment process. And an example I can give you of how that works, if you have the luxury of time to plan that ahead of time, is the Revenue Division is currently undertaking to determine what, if any, regulations it needs to pass in order to make sure that the taxes are appropriately collected on the marijuana industry. And so they are beginning to notice up some public workshops that they're going to do before they write anything into regulation. And so what the Administrative Procedure Act says is if you're embarking on a regulations process and you have the luxury of time to have these public workshops ahead of time, you can do that without implicating anything in the regulations process in terms of fairness of public access to the board or giving their opinions. And so the kind of town hall meetings that you're talking about, or public workshops, are anticipated by the APA, but they're anticipated as occurring well before anything is in writing in the regulations. And so what happens once you start actually drafting regulations and putting things in writing is that your opportunity to have those kind of general public comment meetings closes off in favor of the way that public comments must be received in accordance with 4462 of the Alaska statute. So what happened in this project is, because of the timing of the act becoming effective in February, the Marijuana Control Board being created in legislation that was still in the legislature and being voted on in late April, and then needing that bill to be signed and the board to be seated, is that the opportunities for those public workshops with any kind of a meaningful vision of what the regulations were going to look like the timeline was not cooperative for this project. The thing that I want people to understand is we want the process to be transparent. We want public input. I understand that written public comment is somewhat of a formal process. We've had even other state agencies come to us and say, why can't you just talk to us about this? Why can't you just come and discuss and get our input on these regulations? And the answer is because by virtue of the statute, we were in a regulations project from the minute from the starting line. And so once we're in a regulations process and we're presenting drafts and we're beginning to put actual language on paper, we're past that workshopping point. So we are providing the opportunity for oral public comment, because some people just do not want to feel awkward putting their comment in writing. But the normal process for any regulations package in the state is to receive written public comment only because of the type of accounting that has to occur around the public comment, the type of evidence that we have to present law that we kept track of the public comment, of what happened with each comment, did the board change a regulation based on that comment or not. And so, that's a long way of saying that the timeline for this project did not permit the kind of public workshopping that everyone was expecting to see. And the process that we have is very public, very open, we invite comments. We've asked more rather than fewer comments because when we get back to the legislative session next year, we really want the legislature to see how hard we worked to be inclusive and to invite everyone and anyone to comment on the regulations, and that these were a public project, even though we never had any casual meetings or never had any opportunities for the board just to entertain people coming in and talking about it.
I had anticipated that was going to be your answer due to the time that it actually took to get the Marijuana Control Board appointed. And part of the reason I was asking that is I've been anticipating doing another town hall meeting ourselves. However, at this point in time, it would appear that you're going to deal with most of the regulations at a state level, which is the ideal scenario for all of us, because then everybody in the state's going to be working with the same set of regulations, and I think that's critical. So what we may end up doing is once that you get that part done and we get a little more focus on our licensing and land use, we will probably look at pulling together a town hall meeting that we would have, because that's going to be specifically dealing with what we're going to be doing in the local arena. And once you finish your regulation, that's going to help us determine what all we need to include within our licensing and the land use as well. So what you've just told me is we will probably be looking at ourselves doing a town hall meeting. It may be right after the first of the year. The time is going to be getting tight for us too, but you're not going to be done basically until November. We're right in the middle of the holidays. So, but we will get an opportunity to be able to get everybody involved in conversations with us. I will tell you that what I initiated at the Alaska Municipal League conference in Ketchikan was that we're going to be following real close as you proceed and how you're going. We're all very, very pleased with how that's going now. If it continues in that direction, and we're all feeling really good about what the product you're producing. In November at the AML, I intend to bring forth a resolution of support for the work that you've done, and one urging the legislature to do quick action when they come together in the middle of January, because once you get your job done, it's my understanding they have to kind of put their stamp on it, and the governor gets a chance to review it and make comment. And by the time they pull that session back together, we're headed down that slippery slope, and it's got ice on it. So if they get down there and start not being prompt in their action, or decide they're going to start picking at it, we could all be in a world of hurt, because at that point in time, come February, they may be knocking on our door locally, as Ms. Franklin pointed out to us in Ketchikan. So I'm optimistic that I don't have any question you're going to get your work done. I just hope the governor and the legislature does theirs quickly and deal with that the first week of their session, so we can all get a little more comfortable and be prepared for February 24th at that point in time.
Question.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Cynthia, do you have any idea when this goes to the legislature? Have you had discussions with leadership what committees you anticipate this going to?
Well, technically, the regulations don't have to go to any committee. So the end of the regulations process after the board has adopted the regulations is a review by the Department of Law for two things. Number one, do the regulations, do they run afoul of any statutes? And number two, was the process appropriately followed? Was the process set forth in the APA followed in the board's adoption of the regulations? If the Department of Law approves the regulations package that is adopted by the board, they forward it to the Lieutenant Governor, who signs with a 30-day enactment date. So the timeline that you see in the statute, with the Marijuana Control Board beginning to accept licenses at the end of February of 2016, is allowing a kind of a 90-day period after adoption by the board for those two things to occur: the Department of Law's review, the Lieutenant Governor's enactment and enactment date. And if all of that goes smoothly, then once the regulations are enacted, they carry the force of law. The legislature's job is to look at the regulations and amend the statute, the underlying statute, if there are regulations or if there are any regulations that were left out, or if there are any policy decisions the legislature wants to make statutorily, if they amend the statute in such a way as to address any area that's already been addressed in the regulations, the statute will prevail. If the legislature didn't do anything, the regulations would stand. And there were some bills left on the table from last session. So if the legislature picks up any of those bills, HB 75, SB 30 to some extent, and really SB 62, which we call the regulatory bill, that had a lot of provisions that will be addressed by this regulations package. If they pick a bill like that back up and work on it, that's where they could really end up passing legislation that might or might not override the regulations passed by the board. So there's really no kind of stamp of endorsement on the regulations that the legislature has to engage in or that the governor has to engage in. But we do expect, just from the activity last session, that the legislature is interested in marijuana. It is interested in getting their policy decisions around marijuana potentially passed into law. And if law is passed is in conflict with the regulations, it will prevail. So that's what we're watching for. And there were 4 requests from the board in terms of legislative action that are things that the board cannot do because the underlying statutes, there are really 2. There's the ballot measure 2, and then there's what was called HB 123, which was passed as an amendment of 1738, creating the board's powers and duties, all of those laws. And so those laws together now are 1738. And there are 4 items that were identified by the board that are not contained in the statute that would require legislative action. And one of them was including established villages in the definition of local government for purposes of opting out. One of them was addressing the lack of license type for a marijuana club or any type of social setting where marijuana could be consumed by members of the public in a public or quasi-public place. And then the other 2 are slipping my mind. They were left, but
One was recalibrating the criminal statutes, which kind of harkens back to SB 30.
right. For example, minor consuming marijuana. There's really no such thing under the current criminal statutes. There's minor consuming alcohol, and so there's some work that was in SB 30 that remains to be done by the legislature to bring the criminal statutes in alignment with ballot measure passed by the voter initiative. So there were various measures that the board looked at at its July 2nd meeting and said these are priorities for us. We've advanced those through the Department of Commerce, which is where the department that we're located in, as legislative priorities. And it really is up to the legislature whether they want to take those up. And some of those were contained in bills that were left laying on the table. So, they may be doing some work around marijuana, but they don't necessarily have to, quote, sign off on or not sign off on the regulations package that the board has passed, as long as the Department of Law and Lieutenant Governor find that it was done in accordance with 4462.
That's helpful. I think that quells some of my fears because, how things happen in Juneau sometimes slowly.
Or very quickly.
That's true.
If I may, can
Well,
I
they're
comment on
equally
that?
scary sometimes.
I was just going to mention, in a workshop that we had last month, we discussed the various contributing factors, the things that we felt that the board should influence the process. And one of them, of course, was legislative intent. And as Cindy mentioned, there's bills that never made it out of the legislature, SB 30, 62,
75.
HB 75, right? So without trying to, speak for the legislature or decide what they intended, through that discussion, those of us who are engaged kind of have an understanding of at least what at least some of the legislatures expect or would hope for, and that does guide the regulatory process a little bit. So I mean, it would be our hope that when the regs are done, the legislature won't feel a need to tweak the regs and can focus instead on the criminal aspects of it, which are solely the purview of the legislature. So that would be ideal. The other thing I would point out, both Mr. Hall and Cindy mentioned the sort of the circuit breaker provision in the ballot initiative, which was if the statewide rules aren't in place by February 24th, then it defaults to the individual communities. I don't want to see that happen any more than you do, and so just because I think it'd be overly complex and confusing. So I would really like to see the statewide rules, as much as possible, meet the needs of all the communities involved with this, so that there's not a need to layer a whole lot of additional stuff at the local level. And so, toward that end, I'd go back to the public comment. If you see stuff in the regs, obviously I can't participate in this, but if there are things in the draft regs that you feel could be tweaked to better suit the needs of Anchorage, this is a really great opportunity to bring those forward, because that can drive the discussion and possibly tailor those regs, or not tailor them, but refine them to the point where the municipality of Anchorage won't need to address those and can focus instead on zoning issues and things that are specific to this community.
Okay, thank you. Lieutenant Case, how are you this evening?
Fantastic.
Spice been keeping you busy?
Unfortunately.
Unfortunately.
Yes. And it's coming back again.
Any updates as far as concerns, issues with the police department in regards to marijuana?
No. You just passed the war last night. I think you spent plenty of time with my current chief and the new chief last night. So.
Right. Well, the law department will continue to go through our municipal code and continue to bring into compliance with the statute that was passed. And at some point in time, when the state does take up some of the legislation they've got, I'm sure we'll have to do some more adjustment to it. But we'll try to get that done as quickly as we can to make your job easier for you to do.
The officers definitely appreciate the statutes when they're written nice and clear for them.
Appreciate
Got a
it.
lot of flexibility and easier for them to enforce.
Great. Thank you.
I have one.
Yes.
So I haven't really been talking about this on the record yet because I am working, I've been in discussions with Chief Mew and brought it to John Rada's attention. But apparently, I think the ordinances that we passed last night will help. But I have been fielding a lot of complaints from Eagle River regarding people doing a lot of smoking and stuff in parks out in Eagle River, in vehicles specifically. So I went last week about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and I sat at Schroeder Park for 1 hour, and I observed 3 vehicles pull up. I had my windows down, and they were smoking there. And I watched people on the basketball court. Now, to their credit, I watched a couple of the kids go over and pick up some trash that was on the ground and throw it away. So I thought that was great. But it's been, increasingly, I've been fielding a lot more complaints about it, specifically in my community. So I think there's more work, ideas that John Rada and Chief Mew have to address the issue. But I do see other areas where we can improve to help the police department with some of it. But I'm not ready yet to say exactly what it's going to look like, but just to put on APD's radar that I'm fielding a lot of those calls and Facebook messages.
Any other questions of Lieutenant Case? Okay, I'm on a tag team, you two. Clerk's office, dual licensing, and Erica with the planning and permitting and use. So whichever one of you want to lead off, or however you want to work it.
Tag team it. We have, for Anchorage, been exploring a dual licensing option, so having a marijuana establishment would need to get a state's license and then also need to get a license for the municipality of Anchorage. I think this might be a way to address concerns that come up specifically in Anchorage, and just to make sure that we are able to address concerns that come up. So we're exploring a model where they would apply for a license and there would be a land use component of it. So we are trying to identify what are the concerns for the municipality of Anchorage, and out of those concerns, what are those are specifically land use and what are specifically a licensing concern. So if somebody is concerned about maybe hours or advertising, that might be more of a licensing issue. But if they're concerned about marijuana establishments in the downtown core, for example, that would be more of a land use. So we are both working to first identify those concerns and then address them in licensing ordinance and a land use ordinance.
So one of the things that Amanda just said, but I just wanted to emphasize, is we are working on a way to make it kind of a one-stop shop, because right now, the state provides, like for alcohol, the state provides the alcohol information to the clerk's office, but the applicant also has to come out to the planning department to apply for the land use approval. And of course, we don't issue licenses for alcohol, but we're trying to make it to make sure we can have a method where they come to apply to the clerk's office for their license, and that would include the application for their land use approval, so that they don't have to come to both locations and they can just deal with it all at once. We thought that would be more convenient. I think one of the big questions that needs to be answered is how is the relationship between the approval of the land use, the land use approval, who's going to approve that, and how will that relate to the licensing approval? There's been a lot of feedback from the assembly about the assembly wants to approve the land use issuance, which is great, but will the assembly also issue the license, or will that be done administratively through the clerk's office? So those are some questions, that need to be worked out about the relationship between the two decisions, because they would be kind of separate decisions, presumably.
So I think Erica and I are trying to identify all of the policy decisions in both of these and sort of give our policymakers a menu of options to choose from as we move forward with this.
So some of the big issues on the land use end would be, what districts would these be allowed in? I think there's some things that are pretty obvious, that, in the B3, you would allow retail establishments, of course, but questions that still need to be answered would be, is there any type of marijuana establishment that would be allowed in a residential district? Would any type of these establishments be allowed in downtown? We've seen some communities that have taken their central tourist area and said, no, we don't want marijuana stores in those areas, but on the other hand, the kind of alternating opinion is that this is going to foster tourism and that we should allow them where we have the majority of our tourist business. So you can kind of see both perspectives. And then another big question would be our neighborhood business districts, our B1A and our B1B, where you see kind of smaller zoning areas that can be more tucked into a neighborhood. So for example, the Fire Island Bakery area in South Addition is zone B1A. So assuming we have little pockets of that sort of zoning within neighborhoods, would we want to allow marijuana establishments in those districts? So that's a big question. The separation distance is a question. The state certainly has things that they have, are they in the statute or just the regs?
They're in the regs.
The regs, okay. So they've had certain things which they say there has to be a separation from and a certain distance. Is that good for us, or do we want to add other things to that list? Are we happy with that distance? Do we want to expand that distance? One of the big things to keep in mind in that situation is our ability to access data about where these uses are. Sometimes when a use is by right in a district, the planning department doesn't necessarily know, if it's a church that's a by right use in a B3 district, we don't necessarily know when it's gone into a strip mall in order to properly evaluate the separation distance. So there could be changes needed for the coordination of information to make sure that we can actually track the uses that we want to make sure that we have separation distances from. We talked about the land use approval, who's going to issue it, do all the types of establishments need to come to the assembly for approval? The one thing that I've kind of raised multiple times is the testing facility. Does the testing facility need to come to the assembly for approval? It seems pretty clear that the assembly would definitely want to look at the other three types, which would be your grow operation, your processing, and your retail store. But the testing, to me, would just be one I would flag as, think about this, is that something that needs to come to you? And then the last issue that we've talked a little bit about, but that will need some significant thought, is whether the land use approval expires or not. You've definitely discussed not wanting to see transferability in the licenses. Traditionally, a land use approval runs with the land, so that if somebody has an entitlement on a piece of property, they can sell the property and the entitlement goes with it to the next owner. Is that how we want to function with the marijuana land use approval, or do we want to kind of go a different direction and say, no, the land use approval expires anytime a license expires, and then a new person who would like to establish a marijuana facility at that location would then have to both get a new license and also a new land use approval. And there's some issues related to that we'll try to flesh out for you so that you can make an informed decision. Those aren't the only issues, but those are kind of some of the biggest ones that we'll be working on and looking for recommendations, looking for assembly decisions.
Okay. Questions from the committee?
I have a comment. I think regarding your last statement, maybe I'm a little gun shy after I see what we go through with alcohol, but I almost don't think it's a bad thing for the land use to expire with a license, because then you get an opportunity to have a fresh look, and it may be that land is good forever, but maybe like with a liquor establishment that we had right over here, there was a lot of assembly members who felt that wasn't a good location, period. But it's, it just might be another tool in our toolbox, which may never end up being exercised, but it may. So I like having as many opportunities as I can to make good decisions, and sometimes that means reevaluating decisions you made previously. And if a license expires and a location becomes a problem, it might make it a very clean opportunity to sever that location for that community. Just a thought.
And Mr. Hall, I had a little something to add from something that we learned in Washington and Colorado on our trips out there, and in our conversations with some of the regulators there, particularly when you're talking about these distances from certain establishments. Washington in particular has found it a real challenge. Their initiative said parks or playgrounds, and we visited with some of the licensing folks in the state Liquor and Cannabis Board office, and they found it a real challenge to look at a word like parks. And if you think about the types of parks that you have in Anchorage, and you have, obviously we cross over with some state parks, we have some city parks, we have some neighborhood parks, and like maybe Bayshore has a park, and so you think that you're speaking clearly when you say a word like parks, but they have found it very challenging, that word in particular to be very challenging. So the board was very challenged with the language in the first draft of our statewide prohibition, and they ended up coming around and using a definition that already existed in statute, and using a distance that already existed in statute, and finding what we consider to be a very good compromise and a very supportable set of words to attach to that prohibition, so that if we have to defend that, it's something that's been on the books for a long time, and that's been kind of a drug-free zone around school and youth recreation centers for a long time, and is clearly defined in statutes before we came along with this substance. And in relation to this substance, the definition came directly out of Title 11 out of the criminal statutes. So just some words of advice that were passed along to us. Make sure your words are clear, and make sure you're not getting yourself into an administrative nightmare or you say parks, and then everybody is saying, what do you mean by that? You know, that seems very clear, but it can be very difficult to interpret later.
Bruce?
Yeah, I have a question for Eric and then perhaps a comment. With an alcohol establishment, like a bar has to get a license from the state. And then they additionally have to go through some sort of a land use process as well. Now I understand the debate about resale and that secondary market for alcohol licenses, and I don't think anybody wants to see that happen with marijuana, but if one chooses to sell a business, for example, an alcohol-related business, do they then have to go back to the municipality to get, and the community council and all the interested parties to get reapproval of that location as an independent action, like apart from transferring the license for the state?
Through the transfer process, which Amanda can probably speak to about better, they check with planning to see whether there is a land use approval, but they don't have to re-establish that approval.
Okay, so my comment then would be for the assembly to maybe consider that very carefully, because if you impose this double layer of approval on marijuana establishments, first of all, let me preface this by saying, with the renewal of a state license or the transfer of a marijuana license to a new owner or a new group of owners, there will undoubtedly be input from the community, from the assembly. I can't imagine that not happening. But to apply a secondary level where the land use permit automatically expires really is kind of a case of double indemnity and introduces a significantly greater risk on an industry that's already dealing with a lot of uncertainties. So without diluting the assembly's input on the use of that property, I would respectfully suggest that maybe that it should be treated more like a bar in that respect, because everyone's still going to have input on what goes on in that business, and the new owners are still going to be evaluated, their backgrounds checked, and so forth. But to what you describe as another opportunity to look at it sounds a lot to a business owner like another opportunity to have their business pulled out from under them.
That's not it at all. And if I can respond, what I'm saying is, what she was saying is, does that land use in that particular location expire when the license is expired?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not a double layer. What it is, it's starting over. It's saying if somebody else wants to come in and start a marijuana dispensary in location X, and maybe potentially the reason that other license expired was because there was a problem with location X, the assembly has an ability then to say that's not an appropriate location. Go find a different one, essentially. So there's no reason to say the assembly shouldn't have that opportunity. I mean, we just dealt with it. For example, a liquor dispensary outfit that's on a major transit corridor where potentially there was a high density of inebriates hanging around was a dangerous situation, right? So there were some assembly members who felt that was just a poor location. So just to not have the ability to just have another opportunity to evaluate the location independently, I think there's no reason not to give yourself that tool.
Well, I'm not suggesting that through the chair, I'm not suggesting the assembly should not have that input, but there's two considerations here. First of all, you mentioned inebriates, and I think there's an important distinction that needs to be made between these two industries. At present, no marijuana licenses that are being contemplated are likely to attract that kind of on-street influence. You're not going to have people showing up to a grow operation or a retail store and hanging out inebriated in front of the store. This is not a dynamic that's occurred in any other state. So there is that significant difference.
I didn't say that. All I was saying was, when we're talking about regulations like alcohol, and we're comparing marijuana consistently through the process, I have seen in the alcohol industry this mechanism, which I feel would be a good tool for assembly members to have. And I'm just correlating it with marijuana, saying, why don't we learn from the past?
Agreed, but this is one of those cases where we have to acknowledge a difference between the two industries and the two substances. We're regulating marijuana like alcohol, not as alcohol. So whereas in certain bars or package stores, you might well have inebriates hang out in front of the street, creating problems, traffic problems, whatever other problems in the neighborhood. There's really no evidence to suggest that would occur outside a marijuana retail store or a grow operation, which is essentially going to be a warehouse with very little traffic. I'm not disputing the assembly should have some input. I'm just suggesting that the mechanism should be not quite as uncontrollable. I mean, for a business owner, for example, a grow operation, they could have $1 million invested in their business and decide, okay, well, I'm done. I want to retire. I'm going to move to Hawaii and sell my business. But my fear would be that individual or that group could not sell their business predictably or reliably, because someone could come in after the fact and say, well, despite the fact that the new buyer qualifies for a license under the state's licensing parameters, we just don't want you to be in that neighborhood anymore. So you got to take your $1 million worth of assets and just sell them at a fire sale. There is that dynamic that I think we should be a little concerned about.
We're going to agree to disagree on this one, because I think the local government needs the most amount of control as possible when and I'm not saying take any licenses from anyone. I'm not saying that at all. All I'm saying is when you have a fresh licensee, you have an opportunity to evaluate it with a fresh set of eyes. That's it.
And I believe that will exist at the state level as well. So.
Mr. Chair.
Very good.
Can I just amend one thing I said? I said that land use approvals run with the land. That's generally true of things like site plan reviews, but I would like to clarify that for alcohol, the conditional use remains valid for, I believe it's 120 days after the license is transferred or removed from the location. So the conditional use for alcohol actually does expire at some point, but it's not exactly when the license is gone. It's a certain amount of time afterwards.
Thanks, sir.
Can I make another comment?
Yes.
Okay. I don't think Mr. Baskin will like this much better, but just please hear me out. With regard to zoning, in the draft regulations, not yet adopted, at the state level, there are provisions for what's termed a limited grow operation. It's limited by square footage, and this is one of those ideas that was brought up through the last legislative session, and I think the intent there is to allow smaller growers, perhaps existing black market growers, to participate in a legitimate regulated industry. The reality there, though, is a lot of those are currently taking place in residential areas. Now, I get the dynamic. I get the problems with having commercial marijuana in businesses in residential areas. That's a legitimate discussion that needs to be had. However, I would just encourage everyone to consider the value in allowing zoning to contemplate those kinds of grow operations in residential areas under certain conditions, with the expectation or with the hope that it's going to encourage and allow those black market operators to go legit, to participate in a regulated industry. We don't have to decide it now. I just want to throw it out there for everybody to be thinking about, because it's a significant issue, and I think it's worthy of really careful scrutiny.
And we'd be collecting significantly more taxes if more of them decided to go legitimate.
Absolutely. And law enforcement would be less hampered by those illegal operations. So I think there's a lot of benefits to be gained there, but it does require some pretty careful discussion on how to approach it.
Anything else from the committee? A couple of comments. Number one, to the committee, we've been invited. Our presence has been requested at the Title 21 committee meeting on September 2nd, which
Community
is
and Economic Development.
Community and Economic Development Committee. I'm working on getting retrained on that. Community and Economic Development Committee, because they are dealing with land use at the same time that we're dealing with it. Of course, we're all attending those meetings anyways, so there's a deal there. They're also looking at the power requirements and the water requirements in these individual areas, because the thing that some people miss is that with a large marijuana grow, there's a tremendous amount of power required to be able to do that. I have no idea about the water consumption, but it's something that we've been kind of given a little red flag out there that needs to be a part of the consideration. So we'll all be at that meeting to work that, because it's the main part of that decision is going to come from the Community and Development Committee anyway. So September 22nd, that's at Elmore Road.
September 2nd, and it's going to be here.
Oh, it's going to be, okay, September 2nd here. It's a small room out there.
10 a.m.
Okay.
May I add on to that for just a second?
Yes,
because
you may.
it does on nicely. So one thing that the public needs to be very aware of, though this is the marijuana committee, This committee is really spearheading a lot of the licensing and stuff, but the committee that Mr. Hall just referenced is going to be dealing with the zoning, land use, potential advertising. I know Amanda mentioned that under licensing, but this came up very substantially at our last meeting. Similar to when we pass alcohol conditional use permits, there's always robust discussion about what you can advertise on the outside of your building regarding alcohol, and that will come up at that committee too. So the discussion Bruce just brought up about zoning, we've already been starting to have those conversations about, are they going to be allowed in residential areas? What zoning districts are you going to allow? Is it only going to be industrial land that's going to be allowed? Those are the decisions that we anticipate the committee's going to make those recommendations on, but because this is such a big topic and they all are intertwined, that's why we're trying to bring both committees together to actually start having the dialogue, so we're not going in two different directions.
And something else share with you too, that Bruce did a great job in earlier on in a previous meeting, but please understand that if you are opening a McDonald's, it's exactly the same process. You've got to go through all the same hurdles. So there's nothing unique about what's going to happen with this industry when it comes in. We identify all of those, and if you're doing a McDonald's, you'll be doing a traffic study, and it's a big deal, but it's just standard procedure in municipal code when you're opening a business. This is the protocols that we follow. Anything else, Amanda or Erica? Thank you. What we will do at some point here in the probably not too distant future, Mr. Trainee, our chairman, is I think we're going to need to have a work session of the body as a whole.
Give me the date you want it. We'll do it.
Well, as soon as Amanda and Erica are ready, and we're getting close to that date, that we'll be able to do that. So we'll do that in conjunction with that, and we'll make it a joint work session with the community development as well.
We're
So
probably
we,
going to need about an hour and a half.
I would imagine, because with the discussion of the land use, et cetera, it's
Probably 2 hours.
yeah, maybe 2 hours to be able to cover it. So we'll have that coming
Just
up.
two of you, let me know what day you want to do the work session.
And Mr. Honeman at the assembly meeting asked his public safety committee members to attend the 9/2 meeting at 10 o'clock here as well.
Okay.
So it may be a committee of the whole.
Pretty much
Have everybody there anyway.
everybody's going to be there anyway.
Before I move down to public comment, my apologies, Seneca. I ran right by you on the agenda.
That's quite all right. Mr.
Well,
Chair.
I absolutely want to give legal department a chance to share with us. Thanks for being at the meeting last night. That was a great deal of help. So anything that either you or Todd wishes to share, Todd kind of snuck up on me back over here, so I put the spotlight on you, Seneca.
Well, I'll just say we did a lot of our work last night. Thank you to the Assembly for working through that process. We don't have any more from prosecution, any more ordinances that we're looking at right now, but as always, we're reviewing the code as we go through it to see what we need to update. We're working on public comments to the Marijuana Control Board. As Ms. Franklin said, those are due September 10th, so we're working through that. And that's really all down on the second floor.
Yes.
I just have so much to say today. Seneca, I just want to say I think the Department of Law really did a fantastic job with the ordinances that were drafted and presented and passed last night. We're all going to have a little bit of different takes on, we think it should be this way or that way, but for the most part, I think looking at the ballot language and what you had to deal with, I really think you were able to give us a productive product, something that we can, will actually, it made sense. And I just wanted to say thank you. I think it was a really very good job. But my second question to the Department of Law, next week, because we're starting to, really fine tune what we're going to be recommending for code changes. There was a big discussion at our last committee meeting about what regulations or what limitations we can put on advertising specifically. So it would be helpful if someone from the Department of Law could attend that 9/2 meeting and give us basically, this is what you can do and this is what you can't. That would be helpful. And like I said, I know with alcohol we can limit. Outdoor advertising, like on the buildings and whatnot, but a whole lot of conversations came up about what can be advertised in print and can there be this on TV, and that I don't know, but I'm looking at land use and establishments and what they can put up and what they can't. And so if you could just kind of give us a 101 on advertising and what laws trample on the freedom of speech and what how far it is. Thank you.
Mr. Trini.
Seneca, could you get with Denver and find out what their experience has been relative to advertising? Because I think they've been probably right around the court a few times on this. So then we've got a fresh ruling on these additional items.
Sure, absolutely.
Thank you, ma'am.
Anything else from the committee? Public comment. Yes, sir.
I haven't talked out very much. I'm a black market grower. Okay, I've been growing for many years in this state. I've recently cut down all my stuff a year ago to come out and do this legally. All right, I don't think you guys have a clue on how much marijuana goes through this city. The Anchorage Bowl alone, 5,000 people on the low end grow pot in this city. All right, 25,000 pounds come through this city a year. And it's something I love. All right, it's a plant I love, something I do. I've worked construction my whole life. I've had a full-time career my whole life until this recent December when I quit my job to come do my hobby, full-time passion. And with the way you guys are setting up regulations, none of anybody in this state is going to come and drop a dime on the application. When you guys open up next year in February, all the hard press, you guys get 5 people in to come drop off a resume or an application for to open up any cultivation center. All right, 500 feet canopy is a joke. Your guys' zoning requirements is a joke. It's not how the industry was ending. I understand you're going from a white industry or a black industry to a white market. I want to pay my taxes. I want to come into regulations. I know it's like McDonald's. You have to open up. Everything's got rules and regulations. I've been in the construction industry since I was 15. I know all this. But I don't think you guys have a clue of how many people only have $100,000, $200,000 that they can stack into a company to start off on a small limited grow to maybe possibly grow up to be a big-time cultivator or someone that can actually grow up and do something. I mean, to buy a McDonald's franchise, $185,000, you can buy it and have your construction costs set up. I mean, that's doing it the right way. I want to go start a McDonald's company. I'm making more money than I would be able to grow canopy space at 500 feet, which I could do in my garage, my basement. I could do it in my attic. Okay, so there's a bunch of if you want people to come out of the black market, you want this whole industry to thrive right now. You need to take a look at everybody that's actually selling cannabis in the state that wants to come out, and a lot of people do. That's why we voted on it. A lot of these black market growers are tired of looking over their shoulder like me, tired of having to worry about it, because I'm not doing anything. I don't sell coke, I don't sell meth, I don't sell heroin, I don't deal with that stuff. But it's not a gateway drug because it's marijuana. It's a gateway drug because the people that have this drug right now are selling all this other garbage. And you can't go out there and expect people not to be influenced by other things when the only safe access to it is through a drug dealer. Okay? I don't sell my drugs to a drug dealer. I got all my stuff. I don't sell anything to anybody anymore. But what are you going to do when I cut my income off for my life to do this? I have a set amount of money, and then you guys still want to come in here and say, all right, you have millions of dollars you have to put into doing an I-1 cultivation with an unlimited license cap. You want to have it from 0 to 500 or 500 to unlimited? I mean, no wonder I know other law firms and other people up here, investment groups, are coming up with hundreds of millions, $500 million. They're not even growing the city. To not even grow, take it out to an unincorporated area to get their license to grow unlimited amount of canopy space, because that's your guys' one or the other. And it should be tiered out. It should be fair. It should be looked at for everybody, from the small guy that wants to have a mom and pop store to a corporation who wants to have an unlimited canopy space. Well, there's no avenue for me or anybody else to come out with, which is going to push me back into the black market, and then me and an officer over here are going to have to play the dating game for a while, and nobody wants to do that no more. I'm sure you're tired of doing that with people. I'm tired of doing that, and everybody wants to get along. We want to pay our taxes. I want to support my family. I don't want to be ashamed of what I do. I'm proud of what I do. I'm proud that, of a plant that does so much for the community in aspects. I mean, it really does.
Can we ask you a couple questions?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, Bruce first.
Yeah,
Okay.
Bruce.
First of all, I would just preface this by saying I'm kind of on your team. I mean,
I know.
But no, I get where you're coming from. I know we spoke briefly after the last meeting of the state's marijuana control board. I can't talk about that, but I would just ask. You make a couple of really good points. Have you looked at the regs and offered commentary on those? Because I would encourage you to do that, because there's a really powerful opportunity here.
I'll try to stop you here on that.
Well, let me just finish that statement. You have the ability to influence those regulations, which will directly then influence your ability to conduct a business. If you can bring forth a compelling argument and back it up, and if the other board members agree with you, you have the opportunity to influence those regulations. Now, whether or not the individual communities will agree is another matter, but you have a voice there, and I would encourage you to exercise it.
I'll say I've been following the process since you guys started, and I don't agree with public comment. I'll say there's many flaws in it. I've actually been documenting flaws in the public comments, which on your guys' end from not listening to what people have wrote down and actual examples. And I don't want to share this with you because I will be going to court. The only way every other state has ever had anything done is when people come in that didn't like the regulations or unconstitutional, unfair to people. They just allow them to happen. It's easier for me to just take you guys to court and have a judge rule that in my favor than it is to have you guys debate hours and hours that don't even read public comments. I was at the last 2-day seminar you guys had, and I could go through on my phone and scroll through all the public comment and put it in a summary sheet just like you guys did, and you guys took out a lot of information, a lot of stuff that you guys ran over that people actually commented on that you guys didn't even read comments on. There's actually sections on the regs that you guys passed in 1 and 2 that you guys didn't even read the public comment. And everybody wants to tell me, public comment, read the public comments. Well, you actually said, for example, to call you out, there was a situation where I can't remember what you're talking about. You said, well, there's nothing that has a good defense for this in the public comments. Well, I read through the public comments real quick with that section and read for all of them. I found 4 great defenses that would have held up in court. All it takes is me to go to court and get a judge to agree with what I, or what I say, or, and that's how a lot of these cases are going. Arizona right now ruled in a Supreme Court ruling because of the open container law that the odor of marijuana is no longer a viable reason for you to seize anybody's property, to ascertain, stop, search someone's vehicle, because the odor of marijuana isn't like alcohol, and that's the Supreme ruling that just got ruled on, I think, the 13th of this month in Arizona. Washington, D.C. no longer requires drug testing for.
Okay, I want to.
Can I just recap just very briefly?
Okay.
I would rather work with you to come up with regs that work than argue about it in court, because if it goes to court, everybody's stalled. Everybody comes to a standstill. That doesn't help anyone. But that's all I have to say. I think this is something something.
I just have 2 very brief questions. First, it's more of a comment. When we're getting public comments, it's helpful for us, for you to tell us your name, because then we know who we're talking to.
Marcus Moore.
Okay, Marcus?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, well, it's nice to meet you. 2 things that you had made comments about. One was limiting licensing. Rather than, can you talk to me about if you think there should be limited licenses?
I think it should be. I don't think that if you allow everybody in the state that wants to come out legally right now and grow pot and grow as much pot as they want, that you'd be able to supply the demand that this city needs. Okay. I know for a fact that 60% of this city gets shipped up here.
Okay, now my second question, when it comes to zoning, do you understand that the laws that we have on the books, we have zoning that tells us where residential can be, where industrial, where you can put a coffee shop. So with that in your mind, are there specific zoning areas you think pot shouldn't be, like residential areas? I mean, grow operations or shops, or do you think it should just be open everywhere?
Cultivation, look at Colorado, California cultivation, if kept in your house, kept secure, kept out of the public, you wouldn't know. On Muldoon alone, 560 houses I know grow pot. Okay, so you're telling me all these people have a supplementary income. Okay, this is a supplementary income that people, families have been thriving on and dependent on for generations now. Second, third generations of family have been dependent on their families' growth to help send their kids to college, send their kids to this. And they're not willing to come out, because why would they give away an income where they have a bedroom in a facility that's state of the art, nice. These aren't just joke closet grows where you see people growing. These are very well put up, very well set, electrical done right, coded. All this stuff is done right because they've been doing it so long.
I appreciate your comments, Marcus. And the last thing is, it's not a question, it's just a statement. The reason we're passing these regulations and we're doing this is because the ballot measure told us we had to, effectively. So what you voted yes on basically forced us to do what we're doing today.
I understand
That's why
that.
we're
I
here.
just look at it
I
how
appreciate it.
this
I have no
is,
more
you
questions.
know.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir. And give us your name.
My name is Rick Usher. This is my wife, Chris
Mhm.
Usher. We plan on hopefully opening up a cultivation facility here in Anchorage. I have a concern about the conditional use permit expiring. If I sink $1 million into a facility that's okay now, but in a year and a half, somebody builds a church and they violate my area that I have to be away from a church or a facility, do I get grandfathered in, or my conditional use permit gets pulled and I have to move?
No, no.
Because
I-
I'd be paying a lot of
Sure.
taxes to the
To
state.
be grandfathered.
and
Yeah, I think
something
you'll-
like that would be paying anyway.
I think you'll appreciate the answer. You'll be okay with that, Erica?
Well, it depends on what you guys decide.
I can tell
Yeah.
you. I
True,
can tell you. We have
but-
no
From my
intention,
perspective,
yeah.
your grandfather.
You'd be grandfathered.
Exactly.
We're not gonna let little churches pop up all over Anchorage to try and drive you out of business.
Right. Well, and I don't have a problem with people to build a church wherever they want, but.
I know, but nonetheless, I don't want
Yeah,
you to have.
you were
to
there
because
first.
Church moves in, okay?
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Yeah, my name is Randy Knight. I agree 100%. People are going to be sinking a lot of money into secure places. I know growers who had situations where they were robbed. People broke into their place. And who do they call? They can't call the police. They're on their own. And these black market operations, these people know that. You've got people being shot all over town on an almost daily basis. Crime is going up. We have no way of protecting ourselves if operations are running black market. We want to come out. We want the protection of the law. We want to have people not ostracize us, treat us like criminals. And the harder you make it, the more you're going to push people into the shadows. The more people you push into the shadows, the less we have to deal with the city. We want to pay our taxes. We want to feel protected. But if I have to come up with $1 million to even get started, it's not going to happen. Who do you know that has $1 million from growing? I don't know anyone.
They're in jail.
They're in jail. They're in prison. They're doing life sentences. This is a bad situation when you push and make it as hard as possible for people to come out of the shadows. You need to invite people out of the shadows. And from what I've seen, that's not what you're doing. You're trying to build corporations that are going to take over.
Thank you.
I just want to clarify. I don't think the comments you hear me make, it's not because I'm trying to make it hard. I'm trying to make sure that there's a fair framework and that if we, when I talk about alcohol, we've had some good operators, some great operators, and we've had some bad ones. And what we know is from an alcohol perspective, it's been very difficult to pull those conditional use permits or those licenses back. And so we're trying to learn from that mistake and just set up a very clear framework of this is the process, this is what you can anticipate. That way when you sink your money into it, you know exactly what to expect. That's it. So,
May I comment?
Sure.
How many people do you know have died from alcohol?
Probably quite a few.
How many people have died from use of marijuana?
No idea.
None. Zero. When people have died involved in marijuana, people are being robbed, people are defending themselves.
I don't.
Criminal activity because they're forced into shadow and they have no protection from the law.
I appreciate your comments. Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes, Mr. Peterson.
And I just wanted to comment on some of the public comments, and some of them make a lot of sense to me. If the state and the municipalities around the state of Alaska want to bring in some tax money, we're going to need to have a higher percentage of the people in the black market come out into the light of day and become legitimate businesses. They pay taxes to the state, they'll pay taxes to the feds, they'll pay taxes to local municipalities, they'll be hiring locally, That money will stay in our local economy and will help grow our economy and provide jobs, which could be very, very important in the state of Alaska in the next few years, the way the prospects are looking right now. So I think they made some good comments today that we need to take into account. And I also want to encourage members of the public to make comments on the Marijuana Control Board's proposed regulations, because I do think that is the best way that you can get some changes made early on. We are still in the developmental stages right now. You know, if you think we should be creating licenses for small growers in neighborhoods, that's a comment you should make. Because that's a possibility. Mr. Schulte, when he gave us his report earlier, said that the committee is actually considering writing a regulation like that. And I think that's a very good idea myself. And we've been talking about wondering whether we have enough electricity in certain areas of town to provide electricity for large industrial grows. Well, electricity demand in neighborhoods where they've already been growing for 30 or 40 years is already been there. It's already established. The electric companies don't have to build additional lines. They don't have to add additional infrastructure. It makes perfect sense to me to let people who have acquired the expertise by doing it illegal for 30 or 40 years to come out into the light of day and become legitimate business people.
May I expand on that? The advances in electronics, LED lighting, there are dramatic increases in efficiency. The use of electricity is actually probably going to drop a lot. There's a lot of people historically, middle halide lighting, so high pressure sodium are very expensive. Their efficiency is better than incandescent, but the developments, thank you to NASA, their decisions to push expand the grow lighting is improved dramatically from 5 years ago. It's far more efficient. The new infrastructures that will be going in, I guarantee you they're going to be pushing higher efficiency. Your use of electricity is probably going to drop considerably with new operations that are operating legitimately. You buy the equipment legitimately and don't have to do it backdoor.
Thank you. Yes, sir. I've got a gentleman ahead of you right here.
Nick Miller, I hope to open a retail facility. And from my perspective, it feels like you regulate it like alcohol when it meets the ends you want. You regulate it like smoke when it meets the ends you want. When I believe the city attorney said a retail facility that sells marijuana is more like a tobacco shop. When are we going to start regulating it for the substance it is and what it really is like? It's not. From my perspective, it just feels like you regulate it to alcohol or smoke, depending on what you want them to say. Not what makes sense, but what your ends are. So it's very frustrating to me.
It's kind of like both, to be honest, in different regards.
That's neither.
Well, it is neither, but the
So
ballot.
it's regulated as that, and stop comparing it to whatever you want the regulation to be. And that's my perspective. I've sat here in every meeting and I've heard everything. I've tried to reach out to some of you, nobody responds. So you really don't want our input. You want to regulate it to what you want the end to be, and that's fine.
Thank you.
My name is Eugene Carlin, and I represent myself on the process done appropriately, decision made by governing bodies more like in public interest. I couldn't help but note, I appreciate members of the public I'm looking at who are attentive to hear what the members of the public here were speaking. Thank you. But I heard from 4:59 when the first person started speaking, 5:16, and it's still going on right now, speaking. Cynthia and Franklin, Amanda, talking among themselves, but during the entire time before public comment, they were attention to everything you said. But as soon as the public comments come in, these two were engaged and not listening to what the public has to say. This is wrong.
I appreciate your comment, Mr. Haberman, but we are the committee. These are staff that are here.
This is not just a staff person. Excuse me, and you interrupted me. One of the member party here happens to be the key party with the State Marijuana Control Board, if I got that name wrong, for being here, and you have another member of the committee up there, but he was attentive, and I appreciate that. Well, why should I even have to say that? It should be obvious that anyone this table here should be listening to what the public's saying. And it's
Mr.
obvious.
Haberman, sometimes,
Again, can I finish?
but you were saying,
Mr.
kids,
Hall.
what is
Yeah.
the, you are,
He's not a resident city of Anchorage.
What's that?
what happens is when people talk and say something that triggers a good idea, of course people are gonna be talking among themselves. You have no way of knowing that they are not engaged. They may be discussing something that one of these people said, I almost started
I
doing the same
appreciate
thing
that.
with them.
I appreciate
Mr.
that.
Haberman,
Please,
Mr.
please,
Haberman.
Because I heard a derogatory come over
Mr.
there. I
Haberman,
don't live here.
I'm going to ask you to please just step back, please.
You to violate my reasonable obligation.
Sir, you're not a registered voter in this
That has
community.
nothing to do with any member
Yes,
of the
it
public.
does.
I could be living outside the state and I have a right to speak.
Not according to charter, sir.
Excuse me.
Yes.
No, I'll just stand back. I won't say any more. Are you going to allow me to just, I won't say any more. Can I just stand here without speaking?
Anybody else in the body have comments they want to share with us?
I just want to thank you all.
I apologize for that. Mr. Haberman lives in Palmer, and it's a constant, ongoing, yeah,
Mr. Hall, may I make one comment?
yes.
You know, I just want to say to not only the staff, but the members of the public, you know, oftentimes when we're in public meetings, it is exactly what Ms. Tucker said. Sometimes somebody will make a comment, and you'll see us turn and talk to each other, and it's because oftentimes it reminds us, oh, this is a good idea, we need to look into that, or, you know, whatever. But just because you see somebody talking doesn't mean they don't care. And it doesn't mean we're here. You don't think I spend hours and hours of my life sitting here for all the big bucks we make on the assembly? Because I care.
You mean somebody doing what they do.
Well, absolutely. I mean, I think I make, $2.25 an hour. But, my whole point is people get very frustrated when there are maybe outcomes that aren't exactly in line. But I can promise you, when it comes to drafting law, there's often times where every side is not completely happy. What we're trying to do is shoot down the middle and make sure not only the people here are heard, but the other 50,000 people that we represent in our communities that are very concerned about how these processes are going forward are also heard. So we're trying to take your wants and needs and their wants and needs and understanding how we can do this productively together and stay in the spirit of the ballot initiative that asked us to tax and regulate this like alcohol. Now, recognizing, obviously, it's not necessarily alcohol, it's not necessarily cigarette smoke, we're in uncharted waters, and we're trying to do the very, very best we can. And I think when I see the work and the effort that has gone in, not only by Cynthia Franklin and our clerk and our planning staff, and the members of the public, look how much time Mr. Schulte has put in. To me, I am very grateful for that. And I'll stand behind every one of you and say, I appreciate your input. So, you got to put your biases aside and say, listen, this is the situation we're in. We're trying to make the best out of it. So I appreciate everybody being here.
Yeah. Mr. Trainee.
Cynthia and Amanda, I'm sorry for you guys being attacked. You're good civil employees. You don't need to come to a meeting and be attacked by somebody. I apologize. We're going to deal with that issue.
It's all right. And Mr. Trainee and Mr. Chair, I just would say a couple of things about some of the public comments because we were chewing on the public comments, and it's really, it's really impossible to regulate and tax marijuana like alcohol or tobacco because of its illegality at the federal level. And it makes it a real challenge for all states that take it on. And it is brave of this state to take it on, and it is brave of the public officials to work on it. And we have been in states and have talked to public officials who have literally said, I cannot talk about this at the risk of federal prosecution. And so, for this state to take it on and for public officials in this state to take it on and for them to take on the process of receiving input of the public is big, and it is impossible to understand all of the ways that alcohol is regulated. That has been demonstrated to me every day. Even attorneys who purport to be attorneys for the new marijuana industry will make comments that say, you absolutely cannot require this of a business, when we've required it for 35 years from alcohol businesses without a legal challenge. And so it's shocking to some people when they see the level at which we do regulate alcohol, and understanding that this substance requires the additional hurdle of satisfying the federal government's requirements that the regulations be robust enough to keep the federal government from dismantling a scheme that we're spending quite a few hours, and in some of our cases, chunks of our lives creating. It's just difficult for people to understand. But I appreciate the time that this committee has put into this at the local level, because I am a resident of Anchorage. And part of the reason that you'll see me arriving at your meetings is not simply out of my public duty or my job as a state regulator, but because I live here and I'm interested in what occurs in my city where I'm raising my children. So I appreciate your time. I apologize if we caused a disruption, and I want you to know that we are thinking and receiving and appreciating your public process as well.
Cynthia, you didn't cause any disruption, okay?
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for being here.
Any other comments?
I have one other question. Now we bring up the federal. With President Obama coming to town, has the committee made any attempt to talk to the federal or to President Obama in particular concerning his stand on marijuana? He's publicly expressed that he is against enforcing federal law in states that have stood against or have decided to legalize marijuana. Have we made any attempt to contact?
At this point, I'm not sure he's even spoken with the mayor, Mr. Trainor.
Actually, at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, the mayor, the city manager, and Chief Mew will be talking about the president coming up here. Beyond that, we've not heard a single thing.
I have thought about, Mr. Trainee, if I was able to speak to the president about marijuana, what I would tell him, and I think if I had 2 seconds with President Obama, what I would tell him is you need to fix the banking problem. And so I think that is one of the feds have blessed the states engaging in this experiment, and we are engaging in the experiment, but the banking problem is such a problem everywhere we turn in terms of getting this thing underway. And
For the safety of these people, you're right. We've got to get it out of cash and into the banking system. But look at the news at 10 o'clock tomorrow. I'm told they've got an announcement coming out on the president's trip here. So I guess we're going to find out tomorrow and watch the news. 10 o'clock.
Okay, I get the closing comment. So what I want to share with all of you, you've said in the meetings, and I understand your feeling about we don't know whether it's tobacco or whether it's alcohol. Quite honestly, when we sit in these meetings, that's about all we can do is sit and listen to you. We do hear you. We're wrestling with exactly the same thing. And please understand that where we've got your voices that are, speaking to us in one, we've got an equal number of voices saying, regulate this thing so tight that they won't be able to operate. We are going to make sure that we make this as easy as we can for you and stay within the codes that are laid out, because I'm sincere with you when I say you opening this business is no different than somebody opening a Hallmark gift card store. It's standard procedure in the land use. Everything that you go through, any business that's open goes through it. We are going to make sure that we write this in a manner that we do protect your investments, where we're having the discussion about land use, and when the license expires, maybe the land use expires. That's one thought. Another thought would be that it would be transferable. We would basically get the same bite at the apple, but it would be not just a given. So we're talking about all of the angles, and the permitting department, the clerk's department, we're all trying to make sure that we do this and make it as easy for you as we possibly can. It may not seem that way, but guys, it's really a hard job, and we're going to do everything we can to make this, and we're going to do it so that when the time comes, there's not going to be any obstacles in your way to be able to move ahead. So with that, our next meeting, and I apologize for having to move this meeting ahead one day, but next month we will be meeting again on the fourth Thursday, 4 to 5:30. I'm scheduling these for an hour and a half because of the time that's needed. I'm hoping that we end up having a 30-minute meeting and I give you an hour of your life back, but we need to notice the time. So with that, thank you for being here, and we stand adjourned.